The world's financial system is based on debt. The debt cannot be paid. Nobody is discussing any form of a Jubilee, but frankly, we're going to write off hundreds of trillions of dollars, and that's what we should be discussing.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, part of the outreach team of Silver Bullion here in Singapore, where we want to help you truly secure your wealth. Bob Moriarty, an American F-4 fighter pilot and author of books including Basic Investing in Resource Stocks, The Idiot's Guide, joins us today. Bob is an absolute straight shooter who knows precious metals, resource stocks, and, more importantly, common sense. He is the founder of 321gold.com, where he provides a wealth of knowledge for those of you who visit his site. And we're delighted to have Bob here as a first time guest on SBTV. It's time to saddle up and silver up for Bob Moriarty. Bob, welcome to SBTV. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a glorious spring day here, and it's a good time to be alive.
Yeah, I can imagine it is a glorious spring day because I've heard a few chickens or roosters crowing in the back.
Strangely enough, I don't notice that. I've got chickens and I've got a rooster, and they like to brag about how powerful they are. And people who listen to the interviews notice it. And I don't notice it because it's just background information. But if you hear any roosters squawking, just ignore them.
Oh yeah, no, we'll keep them in there. We don't edit out roosters. That's our policy.
I think you just made, no. You just made
I'm
that
hosting
rule
the
up.
show. I can change the rules as we go along. I can make them up.
You didn't
So
have that rule
I have
before.
that.
That's a new rule.
All right. Well, what a treat already. Bob, you have done so much in and with your life, being the youngest Marine fighter aviator in Vietnam, reaching the rank of captain at 22, flying an aircraft between the pillars of the Eiffel Tower, writing books, heading up your website, 321gold.com, and I can go on and on. But my first question here is, what is there that you have not done in your life?
I don't know, but I'm gonna do it tomorrow.
That's a great answer. Moriarty's first law of unintended consequences. Can we start here by having you tell us about Moriarty's first law of unintended consequences?
I am an equal opportunity anarchist. I despise all governments equally. And every government law, every government action inevitably has exactly the opposite effect of what they hope it to have. I'll give you a perfect example. Putin went to the United States in December of 2021, and he said, look, you guys promised 30 years ago to not move NATO 1 inch to the east. It's in writing, and you brought 14 countries in, and now you're talking about bringing Ukraine in, and that it's a red line that I'm not going to allow you to cross. Therefore, I want secure guarantees that you're going to do what you said you were going to do 30 years ago. And of course, the United States totally ignored it. And very few people know this because the mainstream media doesn't talk about it. Ukraine was actually prepared with an army of about 100,000 troops to invade Donbass in March of 2022. And of course, Putin knew all about that. So he invaded Ukraine before Ukraine could invade Donbass. And that was perfectly legal from a international point of view under the concept of right to protect. He invaded Ukraine to protect the Russian-speaking people living in Donbass. So the United States had spent 6 or 8 months preparing sanctions against Russia. And as soon as the invasion started, Biden announced all these sanctions. And they got Europe to agree to the sanctions. Now, effectively, what the sanctions did was bankrupt Europe. So the theory of the United States was we're going to cut Putin off at the knees, and it's been 100% failure. But the most disgusting thing is nobody in Europe was mature enough or smart enough to say, we needed cheap Russian gas. Why don't we not cut it off? And everybody's forgotten this. While the U.S. did blow up Nord Stream, there were 4 pipelines, and they only blew up 3 of them. There is a pipeline running from Russia to Germany today, and if the Germans wanted cheap natural gas, they could have it. All they'd have to do is turn the taps on. So the law of unintended consequences was you may intend to destroy Russia with sanctions, but in fact, what you're doing is you're destroying yourself. The sanctions against Russia have not hurt Russia. They are bankrupting Europe. They will destroy NATO. They will destroy the EU, and they will destroy the United States in time.
Yeah, I could definitely stay on what's going on in Ukraine all interview long, but this law of unintended consequences. If we fast forward a bit, is this something we're also seeing, with the debt ceiling? I mean, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. You know, did this agreement really do anything to help with the deficit, and are we going to see some unintended consequences happening?
Well, okay, let me ask you a question. You're a pretty intelligent guy, and you obviously read a lot. Is there a debt ceiling?
I look at it as the debt ceiling stays at the same height. We just dig a deeper debt hole.
No, 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 I didn't ask that. No, I didn't ask that. Is there a debt ceiling?
I'm going to say no.
There is no debt ceiling. Okay.
No, it can go
All
on
this
forever.
nonsense. Well, it not only can go on forever, it will go on forever. Everybody talks about the debt ceiling deal. And what they don't say is the debt ceiling. Now, the debt ceiling, I think, was $31.5 trillion. Okay. They discuss for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they fight back and forth between the Democrats and the Republicans about raising the debt ceiling. They did not raise the debt ceiling. What they did was say there is no debt ceiling. You can pass any law you want to. You can spend any money that you want to. And in January of 2025, when the new Congress comes into power, that's when we're going to set the debt ceiling. And I just went, holy cow. Okay. If we thought we had inflation before, we're going to have inflation now like nobody's ever heard of. The amazing thing is there is no debt ceiling. There is a debt ceiling deal, and the debt ceiling deal is there's no debt ceiling. I just went, wow, that's going to blow up.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. When you spoke about the inflation, because it seems like the government and this let's just say so-called debt ceiling raising, whatever it is, they are hell bent on spending money, and at the same time, we have the Federal Reserve trying to burn off money. So my question I'd like to ask you is, do you recall any point in your time where you see the government going one way and the Federal Reserve going the other way?
Here's the problem. The Federal Reserve is in a trap. The government's in a trap. There's 300. That's how much. There's $305 trillion in debt in the world, and everybody knows the debt cannot get paid. So we're in kind of never land. We're in an area that the U.S. has never been in, the world's never been in before. The debt is not going to get paid, and nobody knows what to do about it. It's like Afghanistan, where you refuse to admit you spent 20 years fighting a war that wasn't worth fighting in the first place. Uh, the Federal Reserve, if they raise interest rates, they blow the system up. We know that's true. If they lower interest rates, we go into hyperinflation. So it's a giant debate about which is better. Is it better to die of a heart attack, or is it better to die of cancer? And the actual answer is it doesn't make a rat's ass, because you're going to die anyway. The world's financial system is based on debt. The debt cannot be paid. Nobody is discussing any form of a jubilee, but frankly, we're going to write off hundreds of trillions of dollars, and that's what we should be discussing, and that is not what we're discussing. So the United States government, in the form of the Biden and Obama administration and the Federal Reserve, are playing a giant game of monopoly, and they're using monopoly money. They're not using real money. So it doesn't make any difference what they do. It's going to fail.
If you're enjoying this interview with Bob Moriarty and I, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. And if you would like to learn more about systemic wealth protection, please do visit us at www.silverbullion.com.sg. Right? Bob, if you don't mind me asking, when you said the word jubilee, how do you see a jubilee unfolding, or how would you define a jubilee?
Okay, do you remember the $1,000 that I loaned you?
No, you never loaned me anything.
Yeah, I did. You don't want to pay it. Okay, I loaned you $1,000, and you're a deadbeat. Okay, and you're not going to pay me back. All debts get paid. They either get paid by the borrower, or they get paid by the lender. Therefore, if you're a deadbeat and you're not going to pay back the $1,000, we're going to declare a jubilee. And Jubilee says, okay, you don't owe me the $1,000 that you're not going to pay me anyway. The $305 trillion in debt, it's not going to get paid. There will be a jubilee, whether it's a voluntary jubilee or an involuntary jubilee. I'll give you a good example. The IMF and World Bank goes out and loans money to countries that are insolvent, knowing that a lot of times they're not going to get paid. But they insist on changes to their financial system and changes to their tax structure. But the money's not going to get paid. If Brazil and Argentina and China and all the countries who owe money to the IMF all get together and say, IMF, you can go pound sand, that's a jubilee of sorts. We know there are debts that are not going to get paid. So sooner or later, we've got to admit they're not going to get paid, and that's jubilee. Now, actually, in historical times, in biblical times, going back to Babylon, the king, every 50 years or so, would declare debt jubilee. Anytime you have interest rates, you always have more debt than you have money. But the Babylonian kings understood we don't want to throw the farmers off their fields. We don't want to put them into slavery, because then we won't have anybody to work the fields. We won't have any food. So periodically they would write off the debts. That's a really good solution to admit these debts can't get paid. But if you go back to Greek and Roman times, okay, the Greeks and the Romans said, no. If somebody loans money, okay, they've got to pay it back, or we take the collateral including them, okay, and we put them into slavery and their family into slavery, and that's exactly what they did. And it destroyed Rome, and it led to 1,000 years that we call the Dark Ages. We're in exactly that same position now, and we should be talking Jubilee, and we're not.
Okay, so knowing this, do you want me to give you back that $1,000 and then Jubilee, or
Now you're a deadbeat. I wouldn't count getting it
okay?
back.
Uh,
Now you're a
no,
good guy. I
it,
didn't really
it's
load
all
you
good.
down
It's all good.
spot.
Um, so I hear a lot of people, they ask, they have debt. They currently have a lot of debt, and they hear things like, Jubilee. They hear things like a reset that is on the way, and they often debate, should I then pay off my debts, or should I just be a deadbeat and not pay Bob back his $1,000? I mean, which way do you see it going?
Uh, we have a society that unfortunately we have let the bankers convince us to go into debt. And this has always been true throughout history. And the bankers always want to accumulate all the wealth. And that's an extremely dangerous situation. I'm going to talk about something that, to the best of my knowledge, nobody else talks about. And I don't understand that. The stability of a country is based on the size of the middle class. Every country has rich people and every country has poor people, and the only variable is the size of the middle class. When you have a healthy, vibrant middle class, you have a very stable society. When you have destroyed the middle class, and socialism tends to do that. I've lived in both the UK and in France, and France has destroyed the middle class. And of course, every time somebody's got a problem in France, they man the barricades and they want to have a revolution. And you don't see that in the UK except after soccer games. But the United States is in the process of destroying their middle class, and that is exceptionally dangerous uh, from the point of view of, you're going to have either a civil war. And I think there's a civil war going on in the United States today, or a revolution. The United States is exceptionally unstable right now, and it's a country with 330 million people and 399 million guns, and that is a recipe for disaster.
I completely agree. And the way I'm seeing both the average Joe and yes, those who have done the right things, put away some money, perhaps started up a business, got a house, etc. All including perhaps the wealthy are in the crosshairs of governments and central banks through policies which we might call experiments that are taking us deeper and deeper into debt. How much more do you think people can take, or how much more do you think the government is going to push the country into debt before either the people will actually start to rise, or until countries say, you know what, we've had enough with the US, we really need to do our own thing with or without them?
Strange enough, and that's going on, the de-dollarization is going on right now. The sanctions against Russia were exceptionally stupid because it told the rest of the world, if you do something the United States disagrees with, we're going to steal your assets. And that's just a really bad idea, because if you got the world's reserve currency, you were dependent on the rest of the world using it as money. Now, one of the things nobody ever talks about, money can be anything. It can be salt. It can be big round rocks. It could be pieces of plastic. It could be gold. It could be silver. It is anything that two people agree is money. Now, as soon as one person says, no, that's not money, then it's not money anymore. I used to have a mining project in Tanzania, and I had to pay my people in cash. So I would take over uh, five or six or $7,000 in cash in $100 bills, and I would go into a bank in Dar es Salaam, and I would convert it into shillings, the local currency. And the first time I did it, the woman at the cashier, she makes one pile, okay, and she makes another pile, and she hands one pile back to me and says, "We can't convert this." I said, "What do you mean you can't convert this? The U.S. dollar. I mean, it's the world's greatest currency." She said, "Yeah, but it was made prior to 2000. Really? They would not take U.S. currency made prior to 2000 because there were too many counterfeits in the world. And it was a shock to me because it was the first time somebody told me my money was no good. So I got it stacked like this thick of $100 bills that I couldn't spend. Uh, the rest of the world is doing that right now because of the actions of the United States and the suicide of the sanctions. There's going to be absolutely massive changes in the world's financial system, most of which has been self-inflicted. So we're in for some interesting times.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I remember on a trip to Thailand when I had to exchange U.S. dollars for the local Thai baht. I was told I had counterfeit currency as well, but I told them, please give me back my counterfeit currency because I didn't really,
Yeah,
really
exactly.
understand what was going on at that time
It
with it.
wasn't counterfeit. It was real money, okay? However, there was so much counterfeit U.S. currency around, they would take it. So it's interesting. You ran into exactly the same thing I did. And what was the feeling when she tells you, sorry, okay, we don't take that money? What did you feel?
Well, she told me it was counterfeit, and what I felt at the time was, okay, this person's lying. They're going to try and keep my $100 bill.
My one word would be shocked. I mean, I was absolutely astounded. She gave me a stack of like 20 or 30 $100 bills and said, sorry, can't take these. I'm going, really? Of course, they don't have that problem with gold.
No, definitely not with gold, and we'll definitely touch on that. You sat in the cockpit of an F4. I'm assuming that's a Phantom jet fighter. As a Marine aviator, and in that cockpit, you definitely saw clear and present danger coming your way, hard and fast. Do you think people in the world today see a clear and present danger coming at them within the global economy?
Yes and no. Okay. Yes, they sense bad things are happening, but they look around and they listen to the media. And the chairman of the FDIC says, no, there's no danger. And Jamie Dimon said the crisis is over. And of course, those people are lying, okay? Mathematically, you can work it out and say if you can't possibly pay the $305 trillion, are bad things coming? And the answer is unequivocally yes. People do sense problems. We've had more banks collapse in the United States already than we did in 2008. And the banking system collapse has just started. It certainly has not finished. So people are waking up, but waking up is a good thing. Now, I'll go back to something that you asked before when you were talking about people in debt. If you're in debt, you are a slave. You are a slave to the person you owe the money to. So, not being in debt is the very best way to control your future. If you can get out of debt, get out of debt, because then you control your future, not the banks.
It's a great point, Bob. Today when we see people investing in things like the markets, real estate, bonds, they so-called go on the offensive to get returns. But is it time perhaps we should consider going on the defensive where we should be looking more at things like wealth protection, things like stores of wealth, considering these things that we're talking about that are coming ahead?
People who are wealthy understand that wealth protection is far more important than creating wealth. Once you have wealth, you have to protect it. And this nonsense of chasing uh, points of interest is totally insane. Well, the whole world's financial system is totally insane. And the piper's at the door, and the piper wants to get paid.
And within this, we saw a good decade or so where you just couldn't lose. You couldn't lose in the bond markets, equity markets, even to some extent the crypto markets. Yet through this time and even up to today, to some regard, why haven't we seen this type of movement happen in the precious metal space?
Every dog has its day. Strange enough, it is that simple. I went through the boom in gold from November of 1979 till January 20th, 1980. Silver went from $15 an ounce to 50, and gold went from, I think, 275 to 780. Um, we're going to have a boom in precious metals. It's not going to be a boom. We're going to have a manic move in precious metals that's going to make the stock market, bond market, and cryptocurrencies look like child's play. Uh, like it or not, real assets like gold and silver are going to come into their own, and the paper assets are going to go back to their real value, which is near zero. In 1923 or 1922 in Germany, you could take a US $5 gold piece, which was about a quarter of an ounce of gold, and you could buy a nice apartment in Berlin. And we're going to see something like that again. Some of the things that we're doing now, and you talked about cryptocurrencies there for a minute. There are 1,000 cryptocurrencies. How many of them could possibly succeed? And the answer is not very many. But somebody believes that all of those 1,000 cryptocurrencies are going to succeed, and the answer is they're not. What the Federal Reserve and what the debt ceiling deal just did is drive the value of bonds uh, lower, because interest rates are going to go up. And it came very close to blowing up the world's financial system last fall, and it's going to blow up the world's financial system this time. You can work it out mathematically. Uh, when you go from zero interest rates, which means free money, to 5 or 5.25 or 5.5%, you blow the financial system up. It's not rocket science, it's basic math. So the Federal Reserve is going to continue raising interest rates until the system blows up. And that's fairly soon.
Yeah, I think a lot of people they believe the same thing. When we say the system blows up, is this the reset that people often talk about, and are these the things such as central bank digital currencies perhaps to follow that people talk about?
Uh, the government has tens of thousands of people sitting around in Washington, D.C., coming up with really great ideas that always fail. And central bank digital currencies are one of those really great ideas that is destined for failure. The theory behind central bank digital currencies is the government can control every penny in your pocket. And if they don't like you, they just evaporate all your pennies. Uh, you're not allowed to think for yourself. You're not allowed to talk. Uh, you're not allowed to purchase drugs. You're not allowed to purchase guns. It is total and absolute control. And they, honest to God, believe that people are going to put up with it. And the answer is hell no. Okay, people are not going to put up with it. And we're very close to either a revolution or a civil war, either of which is going to be catastrophic.
Right. I believe I've heard you say gold represents freedom. Could you help us understand that? How does gold represent freedom?
Let me go back. What is the only thing that gold offers to a financial system?
The only thing gold, neutrality.
Not neutrality, stability. Okay. Gold doesn't change its value. Okay. An ounce of gold 100 years ago is an ounce of gold today. When we talk about the price of gold changing, we're not talking about gold. We're talking about the currency that you're buying in. And everybody forgets that when you're talking about the price of gold, you're talking about two different things. You're talking about the currency and you're talking about the gold. Now, the gold is absolutely fixed. The only thing that gold offers to a financial system is stability. Okay? You can't print gold. Now, we have just gone in exactly the opposite direction with the lack of any control over the U.S. debt, which is total insanity. When I read this, I just thought these guys are smoking some kind of dope. Okay, nobody could possibly come up with that. And the really funny thing was there was zero discussion in the media prior to the agreement. And it was only after the agreement, and you had to go down 5 or 6 paragraphs into the story to realize there was no debt ceiling. There was only a debt ceiling deal. Wow, that's scary. So paper assets are going to disappear because they're paper assets, and real assets, and this would be gold, and it would be silver, and it would be oil, and it would be farmland. Real assets are going to continue. In a depression, nothing changes. If you look around you, everything that you see is going to exist when we're in a depression. The only thing that's going to change is who owns it. I don't worship gold. If you had honesty in government, which obviously we don't have, you wouldn't need gold. Big round rocks work perfectly for money. Shells work perfectly for money. Salt work perfectly for money. Pieces of plastic work perfectly for money. But if you want an honest financial system, you want honest money. I would be all in favor of using big round rocks with a hole in the center. It's money. They're just hard to fit in your pocket.
Okay, right. Completely agree. I hear you with this one. Let me ask you though, with what's going on right now, do you see us headed towards this deflation, inflation, recession on the way? What are you seeing in the cards?
We're gonna have both runaway inflation and deflation at the same time. We're gonna have deflation of all the assets that have been hyped up on nothing but free money, and we're gonna have hyperinflation in the things that you buy, food, fuel, etc. Houses that are selling for $500,000 now will be selling for $100,000 in six months or a year.
All right. So, what advice would you give us? You've been through a lot in your life. You've made quite a lot of changes in how you choose to live your life. for the rest of us, what advice would you give to us?
There's two things people need to do. The first and most important thing is to educate themselves. In 1929, the biggest financial gurus of that age, Bernard Baruch, Joseph Kennedy, et al., knew bad times were coming. The average guy on the street had no clue whatsoever. Today, we have access to more information than any society in history. And just because it's information and just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but it requires you to think about it and to ask yourself, does this make sense? People have to, and I repeat, have to educate themselves. There are no gurus and there are no experts. There are only opinions. But since it's your life and your future and your family and your country, it's incumbent on you to educate yourself. And second of all, if you're in debt, you're in handcuffs. All you have to do to remove the handcuffs is to get out of debt. When you're in debt, someone else controls your life.
Bob Moriarty, before we wrap up, can you let the good people know about your website, 321gold.com, and how they can follow you on Twitter?
Well, actually, funny thing you say that. If you go to Twitter, you try to follow me. Good luck with that. I'm not a big fan of social media because, unfortunately, social media you kind of handed control over to Google or to Meta or to Twitter. So I'm not on Google and I'm not on Twitter and I'm on YouTube until they kick me off. But I've got about 10 books that I've written, all of which are available on Amazon. And quite bluntly, I write about a lot of different things. So if you go to Amazon and put in Robert Moriarty, there will be something that you will find interesting to read. And my website, of course, is 321gold.com. And it's based around natural resources. And I post articles from a lot of other people. And we've done it for, I think, 23 years. And we update it every single day. And we get anywhere from 50 to 100,000 people a day coming to the website. We're going to have a boom in natural resources that's coming very soon.
One of those books on Amazon, What Became of the Crow? Can you offer us a teaser about that book? The title seems to be calling me to take a look at it.
Strange enough, here's what happened. I think this goes back to 1889, and in Western Australia, there were some young men chopping wood for cooking, and they had their lunch in a pail or a bag or whatever you did back then. And a crow, when they turned their back, a crow would go over and try to eat their sandwich. So one of the young men picked up a rock to chuck at the crow. And he felt the rock and he thought, damn, this is a really heavy rock. And he looked at it and it kind of looked like gold. So they drove into town, which is like 100 miles away. And they took it to the regional commissioner and said, we think this might be gold. And the regional commissioner picked it up and felt it and said, yeah, that could be gold. So he sent a telegram to Perth, and he was talking about the crow was trying to eat the young man's sandwich, and the young man picked up a rock to throw at the crow. And the telephone line broke. So only part of the message got to Perth. So the part that got to Perth said, we think we've discovered gold because a young man picked up a rock to throw at a crow, and it was very heavy. So Perth came back to the commissioner in a day or two when the wires were fixed and said, "Well, what became of the crow?" So that's one of the most famous lines in Australian mining history. But that was a company that I was closely associated with from the very first, and I got to see everything that was going on behind the scenes, and it was really quite interesting. If the public knew all the stuff that goes on in a mining project, they would be really shocked. Everybody tries to stop you in your tracks, and most of the time they succeed.
It kind of sounds like where we are today. I mean, if people really knew all that was going on in the background, things may be a little bit different here. But Robert, it has been a real treat speaking with you. And
Wait a
yes,
minute.
yes,
Wait. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate people. So if they knew what was going on behind the scenes, and of course, what we're trying to do is help them.
right. I mean, definitely appreciate that, all the work that you're doing. Your website, 321gold.com, there is a lot of info on there. So I do hope people will go there and have a look at what you've put up there. But Robert, it has been a real treat speaking with you, and I really do hope we can do this again soon.
I hope so. You asked really good questions, and we covered a lot of very interesting topics. And the one thing that's absolute is we're going to have some really major changes coming up, and it's incumbent on your listeners to do the very best job they can to educate themselves. If you're educated, you're prepared. We know a big hurricane is coming. You can either ignore it or you can prepare for it.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's time to prepare. I mean, we all have a sense of what's going on out there. We may believe it, we may not believe it, but I think in all of us, something is really pulling at our gut to really take a look at that and what's going on. So it's a good bit of advice. Appreciate that.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and it was very interesting meeting. You have an interesting background yourself.
I do. It's a good thing my wife doesn't know all of it, but yeah, it could be interesting.
Don't go there. Some things we don't talk about.
But I appreciate your time, Robert, and really do look forward to doing this again soon.
Good deal. I'm looking forward to it as well.
That was Bob Moriarty sharing his views on the economy and more. If you like Bob's views, please visit his website, 321gold.com. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, share, and give us a thumbs up. All are greatly appreciated. Audio-only versions of this interview can be found on iTunes and Spotify.